On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afrexim Bank.
Welcome to this edition of the African Union Journal. Today we turn the spotlight on the pivotal axis of global cooperation, the future of the Africa and the USA economic partnership. In a rapidly shifting geopolitical landscape, this relationship stands at the critical crossroads, offering both immense opportunities and complex challenges, from trade and investment to technology transfer and industrialization. How can this transatlantic partnership be redefined to support Africa's long-term development goals and economic sovereignty? Answers in this upcoming report and analysis. In a rapidly changing global context, Africa and the United States are redefining the foundations of their economic partnership. This partnership aims to strengthen trade, stimulate investment, and support regional integration on the continent. In 2023, trade between the two parties exceeded $47 billion, according to the Office of the United States Trade Representative, confirming Washington's growing interest on the continent with strategic resources and a dynamic demographic.
The economic partnership between Africa and the United States is entering a decisive phase. With the U.S. strategy for sub-Saharan Africa unveiled in 2024, Washington is now seeking to establish more balanced relations focused on trade, sustainable investment, and energy transition. According to the Office of United States Trade Representative, bilateral trade reached $47 billion in 2023, an increase of nearly 20% over the previous year. Concrete initiatives such as Prosper Africa and Power Africa aim to improve access to electricity and support the continent's economic development.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the African Union Commission views U.S.-Africa private sector collaboration a game changer in our quest for shared prosperity.
The U.S.-Africa Summit, held recently in Washington, saw the announcement of more than $15 billion in commitments for the U.S. private sector. This strengthening of the partnership comes at a time when Africa is seeking to diversify its economic partners while consolidating intra-African trade through the AfCFTA. The United States is positioning itself as a supporter of local raw material processing and industrialization, encouraging a more balanced and sustainable trade model.
Started building those partnerships for the last 8 months now. We've built partnerships all over the continent. We've had bilateral discussions with a huge number of countries, discussions on trade. You mentioned tariff. We've had success in a number of these discussions, and many others are ongoing.
The Southern African Development Community is also exploring new avenues to strengthen its ties with Washington. Bilateral trade with this region has reached $13.2 billion, and both sides aim to double this figure by 2026. Discussions are focusing on sustainable investment, energy transition, and regional integration against a backdrop of global geopolitical and economic change.
These priorities include peace and security, industrialization, infrastructure development, social and human development, and cost-cutting issues.
Experts believe that the future of the Africa-US partnership remains uncertain, particularly with the imminent expiry of AGOA, the historic trade agreement. Relationships are gradually shifting from traditional aid to a partnership focused on mutual growth. In this multipolar world, Washington and the African continent are now seeking to build strategic and sustainable alliances that goes beyond the simple commercial framework to include development and local industrialization.
As global trade dynamics evolve, African leaders and partners are deepening cooperation to secure economic resilience and shared prosperity, with the continent's intra-African trade reaching $208 billion in 2024 and external trade with Europe surpassing €355 billion. Discussions now focus on building domestic value chains and recalibrating old partnerships to respond to new global realities while leveraging continental integration through the AfCFTA, a report by Sarah Yemele.
African leaders are actively redefining trade relations to secure economic growth and resilience. South African President Cyril Ramaphosa stressed the urgency of strengthening trade relations amid global geopolitical tensions and market uncertainties, underscoring Africa's ambition to move beyond raw exports toward value-added industries and inclusive economic growth.
We have reconfirmed that trade and investment opportunities need to be expanded between our two countries, particularly during this period of geopolitical tensions and challenges, where trade is being used as a weapon. We would like to recalibrate that and make sure that our ties get stronger and stronger.
Kaja Kallas, the European Union's High Representative for Foreign Affairs, highlighted Africa's demographic potential and natural resources, reaffirming Europe's role as the continent's leading investor and trading partner. With the EU's Global Gateway Programme, which aims to mobilize €400 billion by 2027, Europe is committed to collaborating with Africa for the continent's industrial and digital transformation.
Africa is a vibrant continent with the youngest and fastest growing population on Earth, expected to double by 2050. With immense entrepreneurial potential, abundant natural resources, and critical raw materials needed for the green and digital transitions. The European Union is the world's largest trading bloc and Africa's main investor and largest collective donor by far, with €239 billion foreign direct investment in 2023 on the African continent. The EU has come a long way in creating its single market and has digital and green know-how to share. Our mutual engagement offers the unique opportunity to bring our economies and our people even closer together for the benefit of both continents.
Wamkele Mene, the Secretary General of the African Continental Free Trade Area, the AfCFTA urged African states to strengthen their domestic markets amid shifting global trade conditions. With the AfCFTA projected to boost intra-African trade by 52% by 2030, Wamkele Mene believes the continent's collective action will define its economic independence.
That countries are beginning to look at our own continent as an opportunity, particularly given what is happening around the world with AGOA, with unjustified measures by the US. We have to focus now on building our own domestic market, and I believe that with the wisdom of the Honourable.
Despite progress, intra-African trade still represents only 14 to 15% of total African trade. Through coordinated leadership and strengthened bilateral and continental ties, Africa aims to secure sustainable growth, industrialization, and economic sovereignty.
In the past 3 years, notably progress has been made in terms of reparative justice for Africans and their descendants. Several Western countries have started steps to return cultural artifacts and have engaged in discussions on economic reparations. However, these initiatives remain limited and challenges persist for genuine repair of historical injustice. The African diaspora, supported by movements like Afro-Descendants and Black Lives Matter, continues to push for concrete actions while the UN encourages sustainable reform to address past wrongs. Marie-Raphaël and Tolo throw more light on this.
Over the past 3 years, significant efforts have been made toward reparative justice for African countries and people of African descent. Several countries, including France, the United Kingdom, and Germany, have returned cultural artifacts taken during colonization, while discussions on economic reparations have emerged, notably in Jamaica and Nigeria. Pressure from the diaspora and international initiatives have strengthened these efforts, though challenges remain for true and lasting redress of historical wrongs.
The African Union has declared 2025 as the year for justice for Africans and people of African descent through reparations. As the AU champion for this critical cause, I'm deeply committed to working with you all to achieve this vital objective. For too long, the legacy of slavery, colonialism, and neocolonialism has cast a long shadow on the lives and progress of Africans and people of African descent. These historical injustices have left deep scars.
In 2021, President Macron acknowledged France's responsibility for colonial crimes, mentioning investments in Africa without addressing direct economic reparations. South Africa, on the other hand, has developed economic initiatives to tackle structural inequalities, particularly in education and healthcare. Although these actions are limited, they pave the way for discussions on sustainable economic reparations, according to experts.
The extraction of Africa's resources without corresponding development, the undervaluation of the African economies in global credit assessments, and the systemic barriers to trade and investment are indeed contemporary manifestations of the historical injustices.
The African diaspora through movements like Afro-descendants and Black Lives Matter have demanded the recognition of Western responsibilities in slavery and colonization. The UN has supported this initiative, calling for economic, educational, and development reparations. In 2022, a report recommended the initiation of concrete discussions on these reparations in Africa.
People of African descent still face the legacies of these tragedies. As acknowledged by the Durban Declaration and Program of Action, slavery, the slave trade, especially the transatlantic slave trade, are among the major sources and manifestations of racism, racial discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance.
However, the path remains fraught with challenges: financial reparations, the transformation of economic and social structures, as well as true reconciliation between peoples, require sustained political will and concrete long-term actions. The world stands at a crossroad, and it is crucial that the efforts made in recent years go beyond symbolic gestures, being accompanied by deep reforms to ensure true and lasting justice, according to experts.
On to this week's regional news featured by Ruth Mercy looks at the launch of the African Center of Excellence for Inclusive Markets in Tunisia. An Ivory Coast presidential election generally peaceful according to the AU and ECOWAS, and in East Africa, $1.56 million to modernize regional trade has been disbursed.
The African Center of Excellence for Inclusive Markets, AMEC, an African Union institution, has been inaugurated at the CEPEX headquarters in Tunis. AMEC's mission is to foster sustainable development and equitable markets across the African continent. With the backing of Tunisian authorities, the center aims to boost the capabilities of African small and medium-sized enterprises and promote intra-African trade, aligning with the objectives of Agenda 263. Executive Director Youssef El Kordafani commended Tunisia's collaborative efforts and emphasized the vital roles of innovation and regional cooperation in achieving more inclusive economic integration. The Joint African Union ECOWAS Election Observation Mission has declared the presidential election for 25 October 2025 largely satisfactory, despite some logistical challenges and isolated irregularities. Out of 1,477 polling stations visited, 92% were rated good or excellent, though 32% experienced late openings. The mission recommends improving logistics and accessibility for the upcoming legislative election. According to the CEI, voter turnout was 50.10% of 8.7 million registered voters. Alassane Ouattara secured 89.77% of the vote, significantly ahead of Jean-Louis Billon, 3.09%, and Simone Gbagbo, 2.42%. The African Development Bank, in collaboration with the East African Community and the UNCTAD, has launched a $1.56 million project to enhance the regional trade portal. This two-year program, funded by the Multilateral Cooperation Center for Development Finance, aims to digitize trade, reduce barriers, and increase transparency. The initiative will support the EAC single window objective and facilitate trade with the African Continental Free Trade Area and ASEAN Asian markets. For the African Development Bank, this project is a key part of its Integrate Africa Strategy, RIPS 2023-2027, and will serve as a pilot for other regions.
High potential sectors like agri-food and fertilizers, trade between Africa and the Caribbean still remain minimal today, could experience strong growth by 2028 for both regions. This is a major opportunity to deepen and diversify economic ties amid the turbulence of global trade. Sarah Ajay tells us more on this.
In the midst of a fragile global trade environment marked by economic crisis and geopolitical tensions, Africa and the Caribbean are joining forces to establish a strategic partnership. According to Afreximbank, the combined export potential of the two regions could reach $1.8 billion by 2028. The goal is to strengthen South-South cooperation and create new economic opportunities. This momentum is actively supported by Afreximbank, the African Export-Import Bank, which is stepping up initiatives to boost trade expected to grow strongly in the years coming.
Important, which is why Afreximbank thinks about it as something that should take a priority space. What has happened over time is this is an area that has been overlooked by those who are responsible for making decisions. But as important as it is, nobody has taken time to devote time to it.
With the opening of the regional office in the Caribbean, Afreximbank aims to ease access to financing and promote cross-regional investment. This initiative seeks to reduce both regions' dependence on external markets, which are often vulnerable to global fluctuations.
The way it is, or the way we want it to be. But with Afreximbank's presence in the Caribbean, what we're now trying to do is to take our future in our own hands, to try and see how we can rewrite this narrative, to bring ourselves face to face to each other and explore the huge opportunities that exist in both regions.
On the side of Caribbean governments, this partnership has been welcomed with eagerness. For them, it represents a historic opportunity to strengthen economic cooperation and open up new avenues for development. Trade steel models could see significant growth in the coming years, particularly in energy, agro-industry, and financial services.
Link, apart from the historical connections, really opens a new way, a new path. This bridge can really bring, I would say, a new paradigm, a paradigm shift in connecting Africa to the Caribbean with tangible benefits such as significant increase in trade between the two regions.
According to data from the International Trade Center, despite a shared history and culture, trade between the two regions remains very low, with only 0.1% of African exports going to the Caribbean and 1% of Caribbean exports going to the continent. Strengthening cooperation could offer new opportunities to millions of citizens in both regions.
On the 24th and 25th November 2025, Rwanda and Angola will host the 7th European Union-African Union Summit, marking 25 years of strategic partnership between the two continents. Co-chaired by Angolan President João Lourenço and European Council President Antonio Costa, this summit will bring together African and European leaders to deepen their cooperation on key issues: peace and security, economic integration, sustainable development, digital technology, migration and mobility. The event follows on from last May's ministerial meeting in Brussels and will notably draw on the 150 billion euros Global Gateway Initiative to stimulate investment and build shared future based on common values and mutual interest. On November 22nd and 23rd, 2025, South Africa will host the G20 Head of State and Government Summit in Johannesburg, a historic first for the African continent. Under the theme Solidarity, Equality, Sustainability, the South African presidency aims to bring the voice of the Global South to the table by focusing on climate resilience, debt sustainability, financing a just energy transition, and the development of essential minerals. In addition to plenary sessions, the program includes thematic sessions on AI Agenda 2063, innovation and inequality, with the goal of an ambitious joint declaration. The summit will conclude with the handover of the presidency of the 2026 host country. From December 2nd to 5th, 2025, Nouakchott, Mauritania, will host the second edition of the Mauritania International Health Fair, a major event focused on innovation and sustainability in the African health sector.
This edition will highlight artificial intelligence applied to medicine, robotic surgery, advances in cancer treatment, and medical skills development. The fair will gather exhibitors, policymakers, healthcare professionals, and investors through conferences, demonstrations, and B2B meetings to promote partnerships, innovations, and investment in Africa's healthcare sector.
Ayuk is a leading figure in African business and energy pioneer and committed entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of Centurion Law Group and chairs of the African Energy Chamber. He is the author of Billions at Plea and co-author of Big Barrels. Through his engagement with governments, investors, and institutions, Ayuk continues to promote a vision for Africa that transforms its energy wealth into domestic industries and value-added products rather than limiting itself to exports of raw materials.
Ayuk is a leading figure in African business, recognized for his pioneering role in the energy sector and his commitment to entrepreneurship and development on the continent. He is the founder and CEO of Centurion Law Group, a Pan-African legal conglomerate specializing in corporate law. He is the president of the African Energy Chamber, which he founded. Ayuk is the author of Billions at Play, The Future of African Energy and Doing Deals, and the co-author of Big Barrels, African Oil and Gas and the Quest for Prosperity.
I think he was spot on. Spot on in a sense where you talk about beneficiation of African minerals and domesticating African energy. For far too long, Africans have seen energy go all out while Africans are left without energy. I think I've always been a champion of saying 600 million Africans have no access to electricity, 900 no access to clean cooking technologies. That is Africa's priority at this time. We need to deal with that.
Under Ayuk's leadership, the African Energy Chamber has established itself as a major player, ardently defending Africa's right to exploit its resources responsibly in order to stimulate economic growth. Through his engagement with governments, investors, and institutions, Ayuk continues to promote a vision for Africa that transforms its energy wealth into domestic industries and value-added products, rather than limiting itself to the export of raw materials.
Also process the minerals in Africa, create jobs, create opportunities, expand possibilities here in Africa instead of losing our young people abroad. And I think that very clear vision comes with him talking about financing the future. Today you saw Dangote discuss the possibility of doubling that Dangote refinery to something even bigger. This is an African entrepreneur doing that. I think working hand in hand with Dr. Lombi, we're going to see some really big things come together for our continent.
600 million Africans lack access to electricity, costing the continent 3 to 4% of its annual GDP. Poor infrastructure and underutilization of local resources are hampering industrial development. High costs make energy unaffordable. To achieve energy independence, African countries must mobilize national and private resources. Official reports also estimate that Africa needs between $1 trillion to $2 trillion to achieve its clean energy transition goals by 2030.
What we do is that we deal with our infrastructure deficit. Right now, we need to invest almost $17 billion in fixing our refineries, just like the one in Cameroon or Nigeria or even Angola. We fix our refineries. What happens there? We create more opportunities by fixing those refineries. We stop importing expensive products from abroad. We're using homegrown production to drive that up. But we'll also do the infrastructure. We build more pipelines across Africa, so we're able to send gas into African homes and across Africa. When you do that, what happens? Small industries, the cost of them getting energy and electricity goes down. Industries, they have more money to invest and build more infrastructure and build more businesses.
Electrifying Africa by 2030 is considered necessary, vital, and achievable. Experts estimate that 80% of the continent could be electrified within 10 years if existing projects were implemented. Despite financial sustainability issues, leaders such as Ayuk are essential for a prosperous and sustainable future for Africa.
As Africa positions itself for a new era of growth, the partnership with the United States must evolve from aid to shared prosperity based on mutual respect, strategic collaboration, and inclusive economic models. The road ahead is demanding, but the potential is transformative. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening. You can find latest updates in Africa on our website, africa24tv.com, and on the application, My Africa 24.
On Africa 24 English, the African Union Journal is presented to you by Afreximbank.